Thanks, Jeff.
So I think you're about where you're going to be for commissioners tonight.
Well, it's good to see all your faces. I call this meeting to order of the Transportation Commission. It is Wednesday, February 3rd, 2021, and I'll do a quick roll call here. Commissioner Kuhn.
Here.
Right.
Thank you.
And I heard Commissioner Burton, you said, Jeff, that he is unable to attend tonight. Same with Commissioner Spice. Is that right?
I believe so. I believe so.
Commissioner Morley.
Here, sorry.
Thanks, Kate. All right. Vice Chair Parks.
Present.
All right. Commissioner Kraft.
Here.
Great. Excellent. And we have Councilmember McCarthy joining us, and city staff. Looks like Jeff Bauman, Martin Ince, Stephanie Sardi, and then I believe some members of the public, which we'll get to in just a moment. So as we start, agenda item 1, preliminary general business, I want to talk about public comment. At this time, I'll ask any member of the public to address the commission for any subject within the commission's jurisdiction that is not on the meeting agenda. Arizona open meeting law prohibits us from discussing or taking action on an item that is not on the prepared agenda. Commissioners, however, may respond to criticism made by those addressing the commission, ask staff to review the matter, or ask that a matter be placed on a future agenda. At this time, I would like to call for public comment for items that may not be on the agenda. And as I call for public comment, just want to let you know the format here is through Microsoft Teams. So the best way to do public comment is in the chat function, which is the comment icon. For me, it's on the top of my MS Teams page on my computer. Click on that and you can enter in a C or a Q for letting me know that you have a comment or question, and I can call you up at call on you at that time. So are there any members of the public that would like to address the commission for items not on our agenda? All right.
Yeah, can you hear me?
All right, we'll start with Richard Gerardo, and then I see Kathy Mitchell also has a hand up. So we'll get to you in just a moment. Kathy, go ahead, Richard.
Okay, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we
Okay,
can. And I would let you know we've got a few minutes set aside. So if you could be brief, we'd appreciate it.
Absolutely, I will be brief. Thank you for your time. My name is Richard Gerardo, and I live at 3300 North Country Club Drive. And again, I want to make sure that everybody understands I appreciate your time and know that you're busy. I'm here to request immediate action and possibly putting us on a future agenda for what is necessary to reduce the excessive speeding on Country Club Drive. Specifically, I'm sorry,
Richard?
Go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
We do have an agenda item related to Country Club Drive, citizen request.
Yeah.
It's agenda item D.
I did see that, but I was under the impression that we couldn't say anything. We needed to talk here, but whatever you'd like me to do, I'm happy to do it.
No, if you wouldn't mind, please, Richard, and I apologize. I will call that agenda item D, and then I will open it up for public comment. So you and your neighbors or others that would like to speak to that specific item based on the citizen request, we can address it at that time. So
that's fine.
Okay. We have one presentation that's ahead, one agenda item that's ahead of you. That is the 4 Cedar Lockett Roundabout. So we will be going through that. Excuse me. Nope, we've got 3 agenda items ahead of you. Apologies. Before that item will be heard.
Okay.
Do you have a copy of the agenda, Richard?
I do.
Okay, so we ask that you be patient, and then we're happy to give you that time and discuss and listen.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
And Kathy Mitchell, is that also what you wanted to speak to, or do you have an item that you'd like to address that's not on the agenda?
That is also what I wanted to speak to.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak for an item that's not on the agenda? All right, hearing none, I'd like to move down to new business. First item under new business is the City of Flagstaff Transportation Capital Improvement Program. This is an informational item. No formal action is required. And Jeff, I would like to turn it over to you then now.
Thank you. You did skip over approval of the minutes. I don't know that everyone had a chance to take a look at
And
them.
approval of the agenda too, but it's a little late.
We can
We
go
po-
back. It's not too late. Thanks, Bob.
We posted the
I thought I
minutes.
was late. I'm sorry.
We posted the minutes just a couple days ago, so if they need to be postponed to the next meeting, that would be totally fine. But they are available if you've had a chance.
I move that we table the minutes into the next meeting.
Is there a second to table?
I second the tabling.
Those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Minutes are tabled until the next meeting. Jeff is laughing.
Thank you. No. The minutes are always fun, right? We always have something quirky about our minutes. They should be really straightforward, but they're always a little quirky. So thank you.
I
Well, now
appreciate that
there are
the
motion
videos-
pictures too.
I appreciate the videos are now available, and so the minutes referred back to the time in the video or audio, and that's very helpful for keeping track of what was said and communicated. So since we did backtrack a little bit, Bob, as far as the agenda, let's see here.
I move that we adopt the agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
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 All right, motion carries. Agenda as is. Moving forward to new business. Item A, City of Flagstaff Transportation Capital Improvement Program. Again, informational item, no formal action is requested or required.
I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And there we go, get screen set up. So here's the agenda, City of Flagstaff Transportation Capital Improvement Program. We have turned the 5-year program into the accountants and the accounting system a couple of weeks ago. And the date we were supposed to get it back, they check it over and make sure everything balances. And we were supposed to get that back on Monday. And as of just an hour ago, we checked in and still hadn't received it back. So we don't have anything to present at this point. I would recommend that we table that item until April. If you have any questions, I can try to answer them at this point, but I don't actually have anything in front of me to review, but I can answer any questions you may have about process or anything like that schedule.
Table until April. Commissioners, do you have questions for Jeff this time?
No.
All right.
I move that we table it as presented by Jeff.
This
there
is
a second?
Kevin.
Okay. Second by, is that Commissioner Kraft? Or is that,
No, I believe it was Mr. Parks.
It was me, yeah.
okay. Sometimes I get your voices mixed up. Okay, so a second by Vice Chair Parks. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, motion carries, tabled until April. Item B under new business. Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee appointments and reappointments. The PAC has 3 appointments and 1 reappointment, and the BAC has 2 reappointments. Staff recommendation is to approve the appointments and reappointments as outlined in the staff report. This was sent out the beginning of this week, along with the applications and a little bit of background information. And I did have some correspondence with Martin related to a few of the appointments, which would be the reappointments. And what I had asked Martin is about the attendance of specific individuals on the PAC and BAC. So, for example, Zach Schwartz for PAC, and then under the BAC, Daniel Krim and Mark Howitt. And my observation, and Martin confirmed, is that they have been active members, participated, and have been in attendance on those committees. So I just wanted to provide that background information. So what I would like to do is call for a motion.
This is Kevin, so moved.
This is Bob, seconded.
Thank you. And now I'd like to open it up to commissioner discussion.
Okay.
This is Nick. I trust Martin.
Thank you, Nick.
And I read through them. I think that they're very qualified. And that they've already been really working with the city and doing a lot of things. So that's great to have them put in.
Yeah, likewise. I read through them as well, and I think it's a good slate of candidates there.
Excellent. Martin, you have a comment?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just think it's worth mentioning that on the Pedestrian Advisory Committee, you'll note we have 3 new members to be appointed. Two of the vacancies have been around for a little while, and we recently did some outreach to recruit new members and got a good response to that, so we were very pleased. But I did want to mention that one of the vacancies was created by the resignation or retirement of Jack Welch, who many of you, I think, recognize. Jack has been on the Pedestrian Advisory Committee for a couple of years, and he's served 2 different tours of duty. He's also been on the Bicycle Advisory Committee. I think he's also been on the Transportation Committee over time. But I think most significantly is that the Pedestrian Advisory Committee really exists. This is not exaggeration, but it literally exists because of Jack Welch. A number of years ago, he began a group, and they called themselves a Pedestrian Advisory Committee, but they sort of lived on the fringe of city government. They were kind of a pseudo-city committee, not really formal, but not really informal either. And in 2007, that committee was made formal and incorporated into the Transportation Commission. Bike Advisory has kind of a similar history, and Jack was involved with the creation of that as well and kept it going for many, many years. So I normally don't do that, but I thought because it seemed kind of significant that we ought to recognize Jack and his contribution over the years to those committees. He will stay involved. He just won't be a voting member. And of course, there's many, many ways that we'll use Jack in the future to be an advocate for pedestrian issues. I should also mention that Jack is doing well. He's canceled his normal slate of walks for the time being in light of concerns over COVID. But I suspect that at some point he'll be getting those back up and running, and he's otherwise doing well. Thank you. Thank you for that time and for indulging me.
Thank you, Martin. And I would really like to recognize and honor Jack in his years of service in these roles. And perhaps we can brainstorm something outside of this meeting that we could do to recognize Jack, and it could be part of the meeting for April.
I just want to mention also, Martin and others, Jack, I believe, also chaired the Transportation Commission, and I think that was sometime about a decade ago.
That's wonderful. Right. Is there any other commissioner comment about the motion and second that's on the table right now? Okay. So the motion in the second is to approve Whitney Holiva Eklund, Tahani Huerta, Ron Norton to the Pedestrian Advisory Committee, to reappoint Zach Schwartz to the Pedestrian Advisory Committee for the terms shown on the screen and included with the agenda packet. Motion also includes appointments to the Bicycle Advisory Committee. These are reappointments of Daniel Krim and Mark Howitt to terms as shown. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye. Just a
Is that
late
it?
aye, sorry.
Okay, thank you. All right, that carries. And we welcome those individuals to the PAC, BAC, and thank those that are committed to continuing on. With that, I would like to move to item C of the agenda, which is the 4th and Cedar Lockett Roundabout alternatives. This is an informational item with a presentation. No formal action is required, although staff is seeking input on the decision matrix and the recommended alternative selection.
Perfect, thank you. I think we cover most of what's here in the agenda in our presentation. Jeremy DeGator and I, Jeremy's in the Capital Improvements Group. Jeremy and I are gonna tag team this presentation. A couple of you I know attended the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, the combined meeting a couple weeks ago. We did essentially the same presentation, got some really good input, lots of questions. That was a really useful meeting. So we'll run through this. If you'd like to, it's a lot of slides. We try not to go too slow. If you have questions as we bounce through the slides, just stop us rather than having to go back later and find the slides. So if you have questions as we go, and then when we get to the end, we have a decision matrix where we've made an attempt to score the alternatives. And as the chair mentioned, that's what we're looking for. Ultimately, your input on is some input on the decision matrix so that we can have a preferred alternative heading to City Council here in 2 weeks from yesterday. That's our goal. And with that preferred alternative and concurrence from City Council, we'll be able to turn our designer loose on the rest of the design for the project. So exciting spot to be at. So let me get this queued up, and sometimes I have a little trouble with my screen, so it may take a minute to get everything on the right screen, but here we go. Ooh, I think it hit the right screen. Do you all see the presentation?
Do.
All right,
Yes.
thank you. Let's turn my camera off now that I'm showing more graphics. And Jeremy, are you with us? Do you want to get us started?
I'm here.
All right.
Thank you, Jeff. Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners. My name is Jeremy DeGator. I'm a project manager in the Capital Improvements Program here at the City of Flagstaff. Today, I'll be presenting along with your esteemed City Traffic Engineer, Jeff Bauman, on the 4th Street Cedar Lockett Roundabout project. So quickly, we are going to start off with just a quick background and project history that I'll talk us through. Then I'll turn it over to Jeff, who will talk about the roundabout benefits and design considerations. And he'll also walk you through the various alternatives that we've considered to this point. And then I'll come in at the end and we'll take a kind of high level walk through the decision matrix and certainly give you an idea of what these next steps are, as Jeff just alluded to. And then we'll open things up to discussion and questions. As for background, I just want to remind everyone that this is a highway safety improvement program grant, HSIP, whose purpose is to significantly reduce traffic fatalities and injuries on public roads by way of infrastructure-related highway safety improvements. This isn't the first HSIP project in the city. There was a citywide sign replacement, citywide pavement markings, which helped enhance visibility of markings and signs. Bike lanes were added along Beulah by narrowing up the center median. Recently completed, the Schweitzer Turquoise Roundabout was another HSIP project. Next slide. A quick overview of this grant process. It is a competitive process that's administered by ADOT as they're administering the federal dollars. Back in 2018, the city of Flagstaff applied to ADOT and we were selected. We received a notice of award. After we received that, this went to the Metro Plan, their technical advisory committee and board, who implemented this into their transportation improvement program, or TIP. Once there, we've drafted an IGA, intergovernmental agreement, between ADOT and the city of Flagstaff. This IGA was approved by City Council at the May 19th, 2020 City Council meeting. From there, it goes to the ADOT State Transportation Board for approval. And then ADOT oversees the administration of the design and the construction. So ADOT has hired the designer. In this case, they've selected Aztec Engineering Group, and that's the phase that we're in right now, design. Eventually, the city will be responsible to acquire right-of-way, and ultimately ADOT will hire the contractor and administer the construction of the project. A quick overview about where this project is located. The project is located at the intersection of 4th Street, Cedar Avenue, and Lockett Road. 4th Street runs north and south, and Cedar Avenue and Lockett Road run east to west. The further orientation on the northwest corner, we've got the Mount Eldon Middle School, or MEMS. On the southwest corner, we've got the Pine Forest Charter School. And on the southeast corner, we've got the CCC campus and the East Flag Library. This is the early schematic design that was submitted along with the grant application. And the primary objectives of seeking this grant award were to improve the safety and efficiency of the current signalized intersection. And this would really be achieved by slowing speeds through a roundabout. This would significantly reduce right angle crashes. It would add a crosswalk. Currently we're missing a crosswalk on the 4th leg. And this would also help to improve southbound left turn lanes into the CCC and library property. As for financial impact, the total HSIP grant award is roughly $1.9 million. The city also contributed roughly $60,000 in matching funds. Ultimately, we will be moving into construction hopefully later in fiscal 2022, and that's when the bulk of the money will be released for use. And the primary thing that I want to point out here on this slide is that the city is responsible for any project costs in excess of the current grant award, which will become more important as Jeff walks you through the alternatives that we consider, as there are significantly different costs involved with right-of-way acquisition. And with that, I will turn this over to Jeff, who will talk you through the basics of roundabout design and considerations.
Thank you, Jeremy. And as I mentioned at the end of the presentation, we have a decision matrix with a bunch of rows to score a bunch of different characteristics of traffic flow and pedestrian flow and bicycle flow and right of way and all sorts of things. And with the presentation, there's a couple handfuls of slides here to go through these things. And through the slides, we're trying to educate you and inform you on the types of things that you'll see in the decision matrix. So the first slide, common site applications. You know, a modern roundabout should be considered anywhere traffic signal or stop control is under consideration. We're not quite there in Flagstaff, but we're actually getting pretty close. I think, you know, many years ago, roundabouts were unique and different, and we were thinking about them at, you know, really unusual geometric locations, or where we had some really unusual problems, just different specific reasons. And now I think we've been thinking more in terms of, I wonder if a roundabout could work here when we think of an intersection improvement project. This is interesting, and this is really applicable here. School sites, I mean, this is common in the literature on roundabouts. School sites are a great spot to put a roundabout because of the slow speeds for operating vehicles. Corridors are a common location where you see a handful of roundabouts, and that's what you see in the bottom right picture. A couple of roundabouts at interchanges, you see these popping up quite a bit in pairs like that. And intersections with high turning volumes. Roundabouts do a really good job with left turns, which are really a problem at a traffic signal. They take up a lot of time. There can be a lot of right angle crashes. Really, roundabouts do a great job with high turning intersections or high turning locations. Key objectives: slow entry speeds, as I mentioned before, really low operating speeds. The appropriate number of lanes is a really important thing for roundabout design. Is it a 2-lane entry, which is a lot more complicated for drivers and more complicated for pedestrians, so we're always trying to limit to 1 lane if possible. Smooth channelization, we want really nice smooth flow. Adequate accommodation for design vehicles. Design vehicles are the bigger vehicles typically, for example, buses and large semis in this location. We always want to meet the needs of pedestrians and bicyclists, and we'll go through that in some detail. And then appropriate sight distance and visibility, that's an important design consideration at all intersections. Here's some of the benefits of roundabouts. So this was the Highway Safety Improvement Program. Safety is the #1 reason why we ended up looking at a roundabout here, and the reason our grant was funded. This was a competitive grant program, and we could show the benefits outweighed the costs of the project by, I think, 5 to 1. And that's how we were awarded this project. So you can see some of the data here. Total crashes are reduced by 35%, which is good. Injury and fatality crashes go way, way, way down, 76 and 90%. And even pedestrian crashes. A lot of people initially are concerned about pedestrian operation in a roundabout, but actually works quite well typically. And that's because of the reduced vehicle speeds, and we're crossing 1 traffic stream at a time, and I'll pull up some graphics that show that later. Traffic calming, again, reduced vehicle speeds. That's a theme of roundabouts, and they can be a transitional element from one land use to another. And finally, bicycle safety. Again, vehicle speeds play such a critical role in roundabout design. And with bicycles, there's 2 options. Bicycle can take the lane, kind of a share the lane opportunity, or you can exit in this design that we're proposing into a separated facility. Again, I'll show some pictures of those. More benefits, lower overall delay than other controlled intersections. So in this early analysis of this location, the roundabout, each of the roundabout options that we're looking at perform better than the traffic signal as far as delay for vehicles. Specific users do not receive priority. So this is, we're looking for gaps. All modes are looking for gaps in traffic before they enter the roundabout yield on entry, as opposed to assigning right-of-way of a traffic signal where people wait until it's their turn by that assignment. Typically, you see lower operating and maintenance costs. Average costs you find are about $10,000 for traffic signals, kind of on an ongoing maintenance of the equipment, the electricity. A lot of those costs are not borne with a roundabout. And another interesting thing here, roundabouts don't require long turn lanes. So at a lot of intersections in urban areas, you see lengthy left turn lanes, sometimes dual left turn lanes, right turn lanes. Typically, you don't see any of those things at a roundabout. So while the roundabout takes a little more space at the intersection itself, overall, it may not actually need more right-of-way than a traditional intersection. Some environmental benefits with that reduced delay. at this intersection compared to a signal, the fuel consumption is typically lower, and air quality or emissions are typically lower, and there's typically less noise because you're not stopping and starting from zero. You're yielding on entry. Typically cars are moving slow into and out of, so that's just a little bit less noise. Access management. Roundabouts are often used with access management. Access management is where we're restricting turns in and out of driveways. Typically those are left turns. If you restrict left turns into and out of driveways, then you need to provide a spot for people to make a U-turn. So roundabouts are often used for that. Aesthetics, islands, you've probably all seen roundabouts with really nice central islands. That's actually one of the things that varies between our different alternatives that we'll take a look at. And then again, the transitional piece between different land uses. Go into a little more detail, though I've kind of already touched on this. Motorist considerations, there's improved safety. Part of that is because you are allowed more time to make decisions, to act and react because of the lower operating speeds, the reduced number of directions of conflicting traffic. Just as we were talking about pedestrians, vehicles have just one, you're always looking left for one conflict point as you yield on your entry, as opposed to a traffic signal where you may be judging several movements, significantly more conflict points with a traffic signal than a roundabout. Emergency vehicles benefit from the lower vehicle speeds. And one thing that is important is that motorists should be educated to not enter a roundabout when an emergency vehicle is approaching, to lock up the roundabout. Pedestrian characteristics, again, one direction of conflicting traffic at a time. We have lower vehicle speeds, and there can be challenges for pedestrians with vision impairments, like many other locations that don't have signal control. Stop intersections and other places also have some of these difficulties. Bicyclists, again, can navigate roundabouts either as a motor vehicle taking the lane, or there's exit ramps to get into the separated protected facility, whichever name you'd like to use for it. But it's a wide sidewalk that goes around the intersection. We'll look at some pictures of that here in a moment and talk about how bikes can traverse a roundabout. So here's an exhibit with just a typical roundabout corner. So sidewalks and roundabouts should be set back from the circulatory roadway, and you'll see that in our designs. This is the sidewalk. Typically, we're looking at a wide sidewalk of about 10 feet, which is what we have in our designs to date. And then we have a buffer. Often we're looking for 5 feet, and I believe that's what we are looking at with our designs in some of the quadrants, and that's one of the differences between the different roundabout concepts that we'll look at. Some have the buffer, some do not have the buffer. Separation, of course, improves comfort and also can discourage pedestrians from going to the central island. Some early roundabouts in the United States had really nice things in the middle of the roundabout, statues and whatnot, and we have had some issues, not in Flagstaff, but in other places with pedestrians going out to take pictures. And then the really important thing for safety, crossings are always one direction and typically one lane. So as a pedestrian, if you're on this side, you're looking left, you just have one approaching lane to negotiate with to find the gap. Typically, the crosswalk is placed one vehicle length back from the yield line for the vehicle entering the roadway. So the idea is that a vehicle crosses this conflict point with the pedestrian and then has time to react to this conflict point with the circulating vehicles. And if they're waiting here to enter, they're behind the crossing. So there's a couple of different things going on there that make that really important to get the one vehicle length.
Jeff?
Yes.
This is Nick. I'm curious about signage and education. I typically use the ones by the airport and the park there, and it seems like people who seem to be out of towners mistake that they have the right of way when entering or something. That's the one kind of mistake I've seen that can be very dangerous. So what are the typical signs, and then do you do any other education for the people of that area that are going to change to that, type of traffic device or whatever you call it?
Sure. So I went back to this pedestrian sign. So typically this pedestrian slide, sorry. Typically, you have yield signs for the vehicles that are entering the roundabout, because in the United States, all roundabouts are designed with yield on entry. So there's usually one yield sign, sometimes two. Some roundabouts will have actual, they call them shark's teeth. They look like shark's teeth. They're triangles for a yield line. Sometimes we use this dash line for the yield line. At the pedestrian crossing, there's typically one or two pedestrian warning signs, and then the crosswalk markings as well. As far as driver education, I think we have a page on our website still, and it wouldn't be a bad idea to send flyers out to people in the vicinity of this location. With this location, I'm probably most interested in what we need to do with the school, with the two schools, with the library, getting some information to them. I'm not quite sure what the format would be at this point, if it's flyers or web links in an email that goes out to parents, or if it's actually, me showing up at school. Or one of the things that's been really good is to just show up at the corner and talk to the crossing guard, make sure they're up to speed, and talk to the kids as they first encounter this thing. So there's probably a bunch of different things that we could do for education, really at the early stages, so we don't have any of that laid out necessarily. So input like this is really good for us at this point to incorporate into the project.
Thank you.
Sure. So the next slide is the bicycle design treatments, and I think most people know kind of how this works, but it's always good to walk through this. So in this example, we'll start kind of on the left side of the page, and you can see here's the sidewalk, and then the buffer, or we like to call them parkways in Flagstaff, and then the on-street bike lane. And this is good. This Cedar Avenue has bike lanes on both sides. It's not a 5-lane road, it's only a 3-lane road, but Cedar Avenue has bike lanes on both sides. Lockett has bike lanes on both sides. 4th Street has bike lanes on both sides on this south end, but as you get into the north end, it does not have bike lanes up here. But in any case, bicycle traveling down the bike lane, there's this dash line that gives you the indication that the bike lane is ending, and you have the opportunity to find a gap in traffic and take the lane and traverse the roundabout as a vehicle. So that's taking the lane. We've seen some images. We don't have any in Flagstaff this way, but we've seen some images, and I have those later in the presentation, where shared lane markings go in the roundabout and in this approach lane to help reinforce to both drivers and cyclists that this is the place you want to be. That's one option. If you're not comfortable with that option, then there's an exit ramp, essentially. Exit ramp that takes the cyclist onto the wide sidewalk, or in this case, if it's 10 feet wide, we often call them multi-use paths. Multi-use path where you can circulate, and if you're going across, then you could use the crosswalk here, you could circulate to here, use the crosswalk, a bunch of different options. If you were going this way, you kind of reverse course. But that's the two options: take the lane or jump onto the multi-use path. Here's the image I was talking about. So you can see we have the 2 crosswalk warning signs for approaching vehicles from this direction. Heading the opposite direction, this crossing has a pair of crosswalk warning signs. In this example, they've put these 3 white bars. Sometimes in places where they don't have snow, these have a little bit of relief to them. So there's a little bit of a bump, or it's been shown that this has a visual effect of slowing cars down a bit. So this is kind of an interesting treatment. You can see here the shared lane marking in the middle of the road in the circulatory roadway. You can see over here they've actually added looks like the word legend yield as you come up to this yield line. So there's an example of some of the signs, Commissioner Kraft, that you were asking about, and here happens to be some signage as well telling you to the freeway, and then this must be Pleasant Hill Road, which we like to use these as well. These are somewhat optional, but we tend to use these signs as well. Here's another couple of examples. This is called a protected intersection. So this is where the bike lane is buffered from the road with this hatched out area. And so the bike lane, similar to the roundabout, would come up onto the sidewalk, and when it gets this extra width, it becomes kind of a multi-use path. This is a bit complicated with all of the green, but you can kind of see what cyclist paths would look like if you were going straight through. You'd follow the green, you'd go through this crosswalk because that's a pedestrian conflict, and then head out this way. This is a protected intersection, so this is not quite the way a roundabout would look, but the concept that we liked from this concept maybe is that we, in the roundabout, actually stripe the bike way a little bit different than we do the crosswalk. So we have a pedestrian section and we have a bike section in the crosswalk area. It's a concept we like from this protected bike lane, protected intersection concept. Over here on the right is another example where the bike lane is potentially buffered or protected from the road. Instead of being an on-street bike lane, it's an off-street bike lane adjacent to the sidewalk. And you can see in this concept, the bike can use the crosswalk here or circulate around, and whether it's combined with the sidewalk or it's at a different elevation, you can see what's happening here, and then you can cross here. So I think we can incorporate maybe one or both of these concepts into the typical roundabout, typical bike roundabout markings where you just have the crosswalk. So we're kind of excited to try introducing some of these concepts to Flagstaff. These are not very widespread at this point, so that'll be kind of fun to be one of the first to introduce some of these concepts. Horizontal design, key considerations, again, design speed. It's all about design speed and reducing conflict points is what makes roundabouts so much safer than traditional intersections. Size of the circle, central island size, splitter island size, we'll look at all those things when we get into some of these examples, and here we go. So we, through the designer, they've been going for a couple of months now, have come up with a dozen or more alternatives. And here's a couple of the alternatives, and these are, these particular exhibits are showing you how buses in this left and how trucks in this right exhibit traverse the roundabout. So walk you through this a little bit. They're small, but just to give you an idea of what's going on. So you can see in this example, the bus working its way around to make a left turn around this central island. This central island in the dark area is non-traversable. This is the potentially landscaped area. And then this lighter gray is what we call the truck apron. It's that sloped area that we expect trucks and buses to have to traverse. The reason we have that is to keep the circulatory roadway for all the other vehicles skinny to help control speeds. If we built the island way back here, then we'd have really high speeds for vehicles because it'd be just a straight shot through the intersection. So that's the balance that's going on here. You can see in this exhibit, the truck actually runs over the landscaped area. So this is still an early design concept where we haven't quite adjusted all of these areas yet for these design vehicles. Just another example of some of the truck and bus movements through one of the other concepts. This is a double roundabout, and you can see this roundabout is all light gray. That means that it's fully traversable. So similar to what we built at West and Arrowhead, where the central island is actually fully traversable and painted, essentially. It's not quite paint, but like paint. This island you can see has some landscaped area, but is traversable on the edges. Lighting and landscaping. So lighting is really important. Typically at a signalized intersection, we'd have 4 luminaires, 4 lights. At a roundabout, we end up with 8. They're typically not quite as big as the signalized intersection, but in total, we definitely are using more light at a roundabout because of the various conflict points and because we have all the yielding, we are not assigning right of way with red, yellow, green, and walk, don't walk. So we like to have lots of illumination, and turning vehicles, headlights don't work quite as well. There's a couple of reasons why we like to have more illumination at roundabouts. A couple more concepts here before we move into the examples. Right turn bypass lanes, similar to those used at conventional intersections. And we have some of those, we have one of those in our concepts. Again, access management. And bus stops can be provided on entry or exit side of the roundabout, but not, of course, in the circulatory roadway. Here's our existing conditions. Again, we're missing the crosswalk to get to MEMS or Mount Elden Middle School on this quadrant. We do have the crossings all the way around, and to make up for this crosswalk, we installed a mid-block crossing at Allen Street with a rectangular rapid flashing beacon. So here's existing conditions. Jeremy went over that a little bit before, and I think most of you are familiar. Here's the initial concept that we put together, the city put together quickly for the grant application. A basic circle, kind of looks like a roundabout, but as you'll see when we got a full-fledged roundabout expert, it starts to look quite a bit different. As I said, we had a dozen or so concepts. Here's one of the kind of simple, kind of like what we drew with a circle. Had a couple of residential impacts. We're starting to get non-circular and a single roundabout. There's one residential impact you can see here. These are just some of the early concepts, so I'm going to kind of jump through them so you can see the evolution of our thinking. Now we get into a pair of roundabouts. Over here, they're almost circular pair. Here, they're very non-circular. This is similar to the exhibit we were looking at a minute ago. These start to get us to the point where we don't have any residential impacts. That's kind of the thinking behind the two roundabouts. We also looked at just a single small roundabout and then just left turns onto 4th Street. Some operational concerns with this concept, but we did look at this. We also looked at kind of curving the two roundabouts so they weren't aligned anymore, help with some of the vehicle path issues. So finally, here's our couple of alternatives that are still in the running. Alternative B4, which is a single roundabout. You can see we were able to keep all of the entries and exits to a single lane, except for this northbound, which kind of makes sense because the road to the south has 2 lanes going north. Doesn't make a lot of sense to narrow to 1 lane and go and to get into the roundabout. That would cause some congestion here. So this is a 2-lane entry, but the rest are all single entries and exits. You can see we achieved that with this bypass. Bypass lane in the southwest quadrant. Non-circular, you can see it's somewhat offset from the center line. And the big thing about this concept is we are going through an existing home. So much more right-of-way impact with alternative B4 with the single roundabout than the 2 roundabouts. And I can stop here if you have questions about this one, or I can go a couple more slides and then we can back up if people have more specific questions.
Commissioners, any questions for Jeff right now, or shall we continue looking at additional?
Let's continue.
Give it just a couple more seconds here. Right,
Okay.
go ahead, Jeff. Thank you.
Sure, and I can back up, of course. We're almost to the end of the slide. So here's the same alternative B4 with some color that helps you see this a little bit better. Again, we don't have the bike lane symbols. We're missing potentially yield and all sorts of things. These are concepts. Remember, we're only at 10-15% design. We're trying to just compare the concepts and come up with a recommended alternative so we can move into that final design. But you can see here, this red is all the raised medians. So again, pedestrian crossing on this 4th leg to Mount Eldon Middle School, which is great, a great improvement. In this concept, we're able to get the parkway and the separation around these 3 corners. This corner is a little tight, though we may be able to still squeeze it in through final design, but it will take some more right-of-way on this quadrant. So walking through this, you can see there's some right-of-way need from Pine Forest Charter School. You can see we're going through the corner of the parking lot, and then we're going right through this home. On this quadrant, we're looking pretty good for right-of-way. We may have just a little bit of right-of-way impact here. And at Mount Eldon Middle School, we're looking really good. We're actually a little bit further away from the school, potentially reducing the height of that long retaining wall, which is a nice benefit. I see we have a comment.
Jeff, may I go ahead?
Yes, Councilmember McCarthy, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. I I can see that if a person were going south on 4th and wanted to go east on Lockett, so they would come around, there you go, and then right in that area, they'd have to cross a lane to get, they'd be in the left lane. Well, I guess they're actually, yeah, they'd have to cross 2 lanes of traffic there to get to go east. Do you see that as a problem, or do you think people are going slow enough we can kind of work with each other on that?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, this is called a spiral when you kind of, this curbing kicks you out into the proper lane. Do you see, I don't know if it's obvious, but you can see that this lane actually gets kicked out into the outside lane to exit here. And so yeah, you're crossing pavement of 2 lanes, but you're really not crossing 2 lanes of traffic because it's yield on entry. So you have the right of way as you're the circulating vehicle.
Yeah, I was just going to say you would have the right of way. So, and people are going slow enough, so it'd probably work. I'm just sort of thinking it through. Thank you.
Sure. No, this one is somewhat straightforward to look through. The next one is kind of fun to start looking at all the different paths and all the different directions you may end up. Yeah, vehicle speeds are slow. That's one of the design elements that we look at with the design, and that's how these circles get moved around and change shape, is both accommodating the trucks, and you're also trying to make sure you never have a really fast path through the intersection. So if this was pulled down a little to the south, this westbound movement would be straight through and we would lose that speed control. So really tricky back and forth, making sure these things work. So here we go. This is really this is a really neat and different concept. Our designer, Mark Johnson, is nationally known. I'd say one of the top couple of roundabout designers in the country. Really great designer. You see from Madison. He was able to show us one example, and he said there may be others out there in the U.S. that kind of look like this, but there are not many out there. They're more common in Europe. This is obviously roundabouts have been in place there for quite a while, but this is definitely a newer concept for United States or North America. So this is 2 small roundabouts. The big benefit here is that we're much better on right-of-way impacts for this home. We're not going through the home. We're still getting pretty close, and we're limiting access to this side yard, which is an important factor for the homeowner. We've had conversations with him, and we still need right-of-way here and here, and we need right-of-way here. This corner is looking pretty neat. There could be a sidewalk down below and a sidewalk up above. Definitely some getting used to here and talking through how all the maneuvers work. We're told that when you get on the ground, it just looks, you just react to the next thing. So you come up here and you look at the crosswalk, and then you're yielding on entry, and then you're circulating and you make your next move. If you're turning right, you go this way. If you're going straight ahead, then you get in this lane, and then you're yielding on entry again, and you just follow through. You don't sit back here and think, okay, it's through, right, left, right. You just make all of your moves, and it's fairly natural. Interestingly, the operational analysis shows that this pair of roundabouts works a little bit better than the single roundabout in the build-out year, which is, we did a build-out year of roughly 20% additional traffic. We kind of did a sensitivity analysis, checking a couple different levels of increased traffic, and this roundabout configuration performed better than the single lane roundabout, or not the single lane, but the single roundabout. Here's another picture with some colored in things. This is showing no parkways. Again, if we wanted to purchase more right-of-way, we could add a parkway, the buffer separation here. You can see the bike lane exits all exist here on this example as well. Little bit, it kind of works the same way, but a little bit different. And I think that is the end of the slide. So if you'd like to bounce back and forth through these exhibits and ask any questions, I'd be happy to walk through them in a little more detail. But next is if you don't have questions or don't want to talk about it yet, next is the matrix. Then Jeremy will go through that with us.
Thank you, Jeff. Commissioners, any questions for Jeff or Jeremy up to this point? I'm curious, Jeff, about ADT and peak hour and just general capacity of roundabouts. Will that be discussed coming up?
Thank you. We didn't get into that in this presentation. It is in the memo that we attached or posted on the share page. And while Jeremy's going through this, I could jump into it and open a couple slides potentially we could go back to, but we weren't diving into quite that much detail with this presentation.
Thank you. And you said a 20% increase at full build out from current. Did I hear you correctly?
Yes, we added 20% traffic to all legs, which is probably it is more conservative than typical, but we wanted to just kind of get a feel for how the roundabout reacted to that increase in traffic.
Okay. Commissioner Morley, you have a couple of comments or some comments on design? Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the creativity on this one that's in front of us right now, but I think that it's probably beyond most drivers in Flagstaff to figure out how to navigate. So I'm gonna focus my comments on the previous roundabout. Thanks. So just a couple of things looking at this, and it gets a little bit to what Julie was just talking about, the volume of the road. And I really question whether or not we need the 2 lanes for the portion of the roundabout. I know you said it makes sense because that's what exists, but I think there's trade-offs for bike and ped in having the 2 lanes, especially as a biker coming west to east through this roundabout. I think 2 lanes makes somebody need to be very confident on a bike and stay in the lane. And the way the ped crossings are designed, that's also not great on a bike. So I think there has to be a balance there. And I think you could save right of way if you changed that down to 1 lane. I also find drivers get confused in 2-lane roundabouts. And so again, just keep it simple. I also really don't love the slip lane that's on the southwest corner. Sorry, I'm having directional problems today. On the southwest corner, that movement can be made through the roundabout already. And so again, from a bike ped perspective, you're just keeping traffic moving fast. And I think defeating some of the purpose of the grant where we said it was to slow cars down. And I think it would make it much easier for bikes and peds. And so I think my comments generally align around our priorities, right? And what are we trying to move forward here? And I'd like to see bikes and peds elevated in the priority. I think a lot of this is still designed around car movement, despite that. And I hear wonderful things you guys are working through on bike ped pieces, but I think it's still prioritizing the car. And I'd like to see things done, even if they impact car movements, that make it easier for bikes and pedestrians here. Generally, I think we're excited to see a roundabout, prefer that to other alternatives that are coming forward, and think it's a great project, and congrats, on getting the grant to the city. And I also just want to say, I think these are the kinds of things that I really want to see coming to the commission and getting the chance to weigh in early. So just thank you for that.
Commissioner Kuhn.
Hey, thank you. I respect what Commissioner Morley just said. The only problem I have with condensing lanes is, I have 24 buses that go through there daily when we're back in school. And, with the buses and the moving on that, and 2 schools right there, getting through that and maneuvering through that, and we know parents a lot of time will be backed up to 7th Street to get in and around at the middle school time. You've seen it backed up. And I like the separation with the as much as possible with the bikes, so that when our bigger vehicles go through there, and I know we got, let's eliminate some of those, but we're not going to eliminate school buses to a middle school and then turn in to go to Cocoa. So, I believe in the wider and the movements on that. We saw a large snow last week, and you condense that onto the double ones, then we're really in trouble. That's what I have to say.
Commissioners, any other comment related to design at this point? Okay. I think speaking to Commissioner Morley's comments, I recognize the need for the 2 lanes for the northbound coming into it. I'd be concerned that going to single lane, as you had suggested, Jeff, would cause backup on 4th to the south. I'm curious about the slip lane for eastbound to southbound traffic. I think that's a really interesting point about controlling speeds. Has there been conversation, Jeff, related to that right turn, that secondary right turn for eastbound to southbound, and the need from a traffic impact standpoint for backups or capacity to warrant that?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, you're trying to minimize the number of lanes in all conditions, but especially in a roundabout, because we know things do change when you go from a single lane to a multi-lane entry or exit. So yeah, the 2 heavy movements at the intersection are the northbound to eastbound and northbound to westbound, I did it too, and the eastbound to southbound. Those are the 2 heavy movements, and you can see that's where there is more capacity for this design. So when when you're saying it's faster, faster is controlled by the shape of the roundabout. So it's by the curvature of the entry, it's the curvature of the circulatory roadway around the central island, and then again the exit. So we're typically checking speeds at 3 different locations. And I think maybe what you were talking about when you said speed through, you meant lack of congestion or kind of travel time through, which is a different thing. So we are controlling speeds, whether it's 2-lane entry or a single lane entry. Speeds are low. I don't have the speed profiles in front of me, but typically we're keeping them at 20 miles an hour or less. Sometimes it's 15, sometimes it's 22, but it's right in that range. So very, very low operating speeds for arterial network streets. I can pull up some of the capacity work. These are here because they're needed to maintain, level of service D. So we're not building a level of service A facility. We're right at what we typically would design for the bottom, D. But I can pull those up. I don't know if I can pull them up while I'm still have the PowerPoint on, but I can try to get to them pretty quickly if we want to look at some of that detail.
That's fine. And to be clear, my speed comment was related specifically to that right turn, almost that slip lane, that one. Mm-hmm. It wasn't related necessarily to the 2 lanes for the northbound into the roundabout.
Okay. You brought up a good point on that slip lane with that crosswalk there. Could we raise it a little to slow people down? That that slip lane right there.
That's a potential, design solution if the curvature alone, if the radius alone doesn't control speeds. Yeah, you can do raised crossings. Of course, we always have. You have to work with drainage when you have a raised crossing,
right? And snow plowing. And I realize there's a lot of things as we do it, obviously in schools all the time to slow people down.
Right.
In that, that's a consideration there. Okay.
I think I have a couple more comments related to design, and then we can move forward unless there are other comments from commissioners. I really like the separate striping for the bike at the crosswalk. I think that's a great idea and something to try. one of the benefits of this area is a lot of traffic in the area will become very familiar. Most of your drivers through this will be local. So we're not introducing a concept like this in an area where we have high tourist traffic. And I think that that helps in looking at design in some of these applications. I think on the for northbound coming into the roundabout, if you know the 2 lanes at that particular point, there'll probably need to be some signage, of course, coming into that to reduce any sort of panic weaving that might happen for somebody who might be in the furthest most east lane who then needs to go westbound. Again, most drivers will be familiar who use this or will have experienced it before. But I think signage will be important on that element. And then I think there was discussion about the center treatment, which we can get to later. But I'd be curious to hear the ideas on that.
You know, let me input on those center treatments. You know, we have some islands in other places, and we got to watch the growth, because then kids disappear behind those. With the charter school down there and the smaller kids there, and our kids walking to our little 6th grade boys aren't very tall, and the kids walking to PDH. But we really need to be cognizant of what we put in the middle there, so we don't get a lot of growth later on, and it ends up being, you know, kids are behind that as a hiding, or they naturally just disappear behind it.
Thank you. Commissioner Morley and then Vice Chair Parks.
Yeah, just commenting on the center portion. I think this is a great opportunity to do something that's an example for the community, or best practices with low impact development, native, you know, plantings. I think it could be a really cool space, and this is an important piece of infrastructure to the communities that live around here in terms of it being the gateway into their neighborhoods. And so I think really prioritizing some of those design features as well would be important. And then just one other quick comment on the speed bumps. If that was to be a consideration moving forward, I would ask to check back in with operations at Mountain Line, because we do run the low floor buses, and that is a turn movement we make.
Thank you. Vice Chair Parks.
Yeah, I want to add something, and I wish I could remember from which meeting or activity I was involved with where this came up, but there was citizen complaints about construction truck traffic along the Cedar Forest corridor, both east and westbound, and I'm thinking that this could go a long way towards calming that type of traffic.
Thank you. Other comments from commissioners? Otherwise, we'll move forward. All right. Hearing none. Jeff or Jeremy?
So let me jump in on just one thing on the landscaping. Obviously, this is all just shown as green area, kind of turfy looking. With our Highway Safety Improvement Program grant, we don't have any money in the project for landscaping, but that's okay. What we did, we're going to do the same thing that we did at Schweitzer and Turquoise, which is we'll put in irrigation sleeves out to these different potential landscaped areas. And then we work with another department at the city who's pretty excited. They'll work with probably the BPAC committee. Uh-oh. Yeah. They'll work with BPAC and come up with a concept for this. And that's kind of where we're at with Schweitzer and Turquoise. So you won't see any cool landscaping with our project design, but it will come, you know, the year after we build. So just wanted to touch on that. So yeah, let's jump into the matrix where we can have some organized discussion about all the different concepts and go through line by line. And I think Jeremy is going to take it away from here.
Very good. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate all this feedback. That's why we're here today. And just to build on what Jeff just said, we have had those initial conversations with beautification staff about getting on their upcoming program for essentially beautification of that center island. As Jeff mentioned, it won't happen until after this project. It won't be directly, but we will work with them to accommodate as we can the future improvements. So. All right, so we are into the decision matrix. At this point, I'm going to run through this hopefully pretty quick. I think we've got 4 or 5 slides that this is broken out. So we did consider quite a few things. And pretty much at this point, we have included the existing signal. I'm not really going to talk a ton about that. I'll point out a few things about that. This is really about us comparing the 2 roundabout alternatives that we have presented. Our first evaluation criteria was just the geometry and complexity. And I think it's apparent to everyone who has seen these that the double roundabout is significantly more complex than the single. And so we have scored this appropriately. The criteria rating are up at the top there, kind of gives you an idea of where we scored it. Certainly, these are always open to interpretation, but that's where we're currently at. We have scored this internally, just staff. We've scored this with our design team in ADOT, and we've also, gotten some feedback from BPAC and other people at this point. Next one is safety. So we've considered vehicular safety, bike safety, pedestrian safety, and then just general driver familiarity, like how easy is this going to be able to be used? That kind of goes back to that complexity. And in all of these, the single roundabout has scored higher. From a vehicular safety standpoint, we generally look at from a purely conflict standpoint. So single roundabout has 7 vehicular conflicts. There's 10 in the double roundabout. And compared to an existing, a typical signalized intersection has 32 conflicts. So both of these are a significant improvement over that. But the single roundabout does score higher on all levels, bike safety, pedestrian safety, and so on. So next slide. Constructability, single roundabout does score a little bit higher. Double roundabout may be a little bit more complicated when it comes to phasing and traffic control and so on during construction. We haven't really gotten to the point where we're talking about what kind of allowable closures might be available, but again, double roundabouts slightly lower on the scoring. And then, of course, we've also looked at operations. And within the operations, we've looked at the automobiles and bus, like their level of service. Certainly, how's this going to feel to bicycles? How's this going to feel to pedestrians? And then just from a purely analytical standpoint, can this accommodate the design vehicles that we have? In general, this is a bit more of a mixed bag. The design, as Jeff kind of alluded to earlier, the double roundabout actually has, from the preliminary modeling, has some better level of service. It's better for the morning, the AM peak hours, and it's similar in the afternoon. But both of the level of services are acceptable and better than the existing signal. But in this case, double roundabout scored a little bit higher. Bicycles, mostly from a complexity standpoint and so on, the single roundabout did score slightly higher. You don't have to deal with the pedestrians. We did, and Jeff, we did lose yep, we're back. As far as pedestrians, we did score these the same. Arguments could be made that if you look back at the concepts, there's a slightly longer route that you would have to go around the double roundabout than the single roundabout. But if you add it all up, it's actually relatively minor, that additional length. But both of these have the center islands. You're looking at, generally speaking, 1 lane of traffic at a time and so on. There has been some discussions about whether or not what the future needs are going to be for whether or not we have a signalized pedestrian crossing or crossing guards or whatever. I think those discussions will continue moving forward through design. And then finally, both of these alternatives do accommodate the vehicles. The turning movements that we've got at this point are for the bus, articulated bus, and the large interstate tractor trailer, the WB64. So we've pretty much scored all of these accordingly. Next slide. We've also looked at environmental impacts, and as Jeff mentioned earlier, from a noise quality and air quality standpoint, roundabouts do have some significant advantages over signalized intersections, since traffic flow is generally a bit more steady and there's not as much acceleration, deceleration, and so on. So from a noise and air sense, they both score above the signal. Moving into more project specific, so the hazardous materials one, the scoring on this really takes into account the impacts to the surrounding properties. So for the single roundabout, as we mentioned earlier, we would impact a residential home, and this would result in the need for additional environmental testing such as asbestos or lead-based paint. It will require a phase 1 site assessment. Double roundabout doesn't have quite as large of a footprint. We're not impacting the actual structure, so it may have some additional sampling requirements, but it certainly will not be at the same level. So we've scored the single roundabout lower than the double. And then NEPA, which is for those of you that aren't in the know as far as what some of these stand for, it's an environmental clearance that we need for any federal project. The HSIP is a federal program again. So we have to go through different levels of environmental clearances, and the single roundabout, because of those impacts to residential property and so on, could potentially push us into a higher level of due diligence, so to speak, on what we have to do for the NEPA. And that could have impacts anywhere from 1 to 6 months from a timeline standpoint. And whereas the double roundabout would likely remain under what's called a categorical exclusion checklist, a quite bit simpler process. And so we've scored the double roundabout a little bit higher there. And at this point, utility impacts, moving on, utility impacts are not entirely known. We know that based on what we know about the existing utilities, there will be some relocations required, but there's no real advantages with either of the alternatives. Next slide. Access management, as Jeff mentioned, roundabouts do provide us many more options. You know, we're using median islands and so on, restricting left turns, but also allowing for relatively easy U-turns in close proximity. And so both of these provide, you know, similar improvements when it comes to access management. So we've scored them similarly. Right away is the next one that we looked at, and this is mostly just from a footprint standpoint. And the single roundabout, as we mentioned, we would take the entire residential property. So it's got a significantly larger expense to take the property. And so we have scored that low. We never take that impact lightly. You know, that's a major deal to take someone's home. So again, single roundabout has been scored with a strong disadvantage there. The double roundabout, we still have a significant footprint and we'll still need a significant amount of additional right-of-way, which will cost money, but we're not impacting a home in that scenario. And then stakeholder acceptance. And this is where we're really hoping to continue this conversation after we get through and get the feedback. When we went to the Bike and Ped Commission, the single roundabout was clearly preferred from a simplicity standpoint. And a lot of this very similar comments to what we've already heard here tonight. We did score the The double roundabout relatively neutral, but the concerns were, you know, due to complexity, how some of the bikes and peds would interact with that more complex design. Obviously, we will, after this is over, based on comments and feedback received, we will update the Transportation Commission feedback, and so we look forward to continuing that conversation. Next slide. And apparently I got a little greedy here with my slide and we've cut off the we've cut off the results down at the bottom, but we'll get to that shortly. Character opportunities. These are just what we were just talking about. This is, you know, what can we do to improve the character of that intersection? And so certainly the single roundabout provides us significantly larger landscaping opportunities in that center island. The double roundabout has smaller opportunities, but may give us some options, you know, along that MEMS frontage and so on. So they both are going to give us some opportunities to improve the character around this. But we did score the single roundabout higher due to that larger center island. Building structures impacts. And again, this is a big one, as I alluded to earlier. We will be taking, you know, the single roundabout will require the taking of a residential property. So certainly that's, like I said, that's not something we want to do. And so we have scored that very low in accordance with that. The double roundabout, it's not to say that there's no negative impacts from the double roundabout. While we would not take the home, there would be the loss of side yard access and so on. So it still has a negative impact on that residential property. So we've scored that according to that. And moving into cost, we're still very early in this project, so we don't have a great idea of where we're going to fall out when it comes to budget. But just looking at strictly construction costs, which doesn't include any of the right-of-way impacts, they're very close in cost at this point. The double roundabout may be slightly more, but we're too early to really tell that. So we've scored these similarly. Operations and maintenance, as Jeff mentioned earlier, there's certainly reduced operation costs with roundabouts versus signalized intersections and so on. So we've scored those similarly or tied, but both as an advantage over the existing signal. And then finally, we come down to project costs on right-of-way. So there is a significant difference between right-of-way costs for the single roundabout and the double roundabout. The single roundabout, we're currently estimating that to buy and relocate that, to buy that home and relocate that resident would be somewhere between $350,000 and $400,000. Our current right-of-way budget is only about $130,000. So the single roundabout would cause us to go over, and as I mentioned earlier, the city will be responsible for that additional cost above and beyond the grant award. The double roundabout, certainly we're not taking a building. Those costs will be significantly lower. At this point, we don't know or have a great picture whether or not we'll fit within our budget, but we'll be certainly much, much closer. And then what you can't see, and I'll kind of give you the rundown of what the total net effect, and this is how we've scored this. Single roundabout scored a 70, the double roundabout scored a 65, and the existing signals scored a 60. So certainly the roundabouts are preferred over the existing signals, and based on all the feedback and exercises that we've worked through so far, the single roundabout is currently scoring higher than the double roundabout. But again, at this point, that kind of walks us through this entire decision matrix, and I think we want to open this back up to discussion. The next steps, as Jeff said, we will be going to City Council in just under 2 weeks to continue this conversation, and we're really hoping to, after that discussion, to be able to select an alternative and start to move forward with the next steps of design. So I guess Jeff and I are more than happy to answer any questions or walk you back through any of the slides if you want to see anything else. And thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Jeff. like to do a follow-up if there are any questions from commissioners, and then I want to do a call for public comment if there are any members of the public that would like to speak to this particular item. And then after that, I'd like to hear from each of the commissioners, their thoughts related to the ranking. Knowing that this is going in front of council in a couple of weeks, and we'd like to include any feedback from our commission, support of a particular one of the options, or additional things that we'd like to see as it moves forward. So let's start with questions, and Commissioner Morley.
Thanks. I was just wondering if we had approached that property owner yet and knew how they felt about that take.
We have had conversations with that affected property owner. We have not had any clear indications yet as to his preference.
And I'd say we've kept him in the loop on the schedule. And so he knew about this meeting and knows about the city council meeting as well. We're planning to reach back out to him before city council to see if we can get a better feel from him, if he's ready to make a decision or be stronger with his opinion. But he's aware of it. We had a great conversation with him a month or two ago, getting him up to speed about it. So, yep, it's a big decision for all of us.
Absolutely. All right. Do we have any members of the public here that would like to speak to this particular agenda item? Right. Walter Halaberta, please go ahead. We're listening.
That's me. I'm that homeowner.
Well, welcome, and thank you for joining us today on this evening on the Transportation Commission. We'd love to hear from you.
So I guess, talking with my family and making some decisions, I bought this property with the idea that it might not survive, but the idea too is that I think my main issue is that I'm, fairly compensated for the property, and that we make sure to take care of me because I would like to stay in this community. So yeah. And then the other thing that didn't get really brought up, but I didn't want to point out is that, and I don't know how big of a deal it is, but we're on like that whole Lockett Cedar corridor is the pathway to and from the hospital for our ambulance friends. And when y'all were going through that presentation and talk about, oh yeah, and you got to get them up here right away as the ambulances go by. I don't know that people know that very well, and I don't know if they would know what to do as those ambulances scream by. And we are like, most of them come off of not off of Lockett. They'll come off of Cedar and head down 4th. But there's still a fair amount, and I know this because I live right here. There's still a fair amount that scream down Cedar and then Lockett to get to the far west side of town or far east side of town. So I don't know what we can do to circumvent that or keep that in mind as design program or design gets finalized, but making sure that there's a good swath of road there so that people can pull off to the side and let those ambulances by. And I guess that's all I got.
Well, thank you for your comments, and we appreciate you joining us this evening. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Walter while he's here with us? Right, thank you. Are there any other members from the public that would like to speak to this agenda item? Okay. Commissioners, let's discuss. Yes, thank you, Walter. Let's discuss the rankings, and I'd like to hear preferably from each of you, your thoughts about the single roundabout, the double roundabout, and some of the other items that Jeff presented earlier related to design. So I'm happy to kick that off. And I know one thing on my mind, Jeff and Jeremy, is related to construction and during construction and the sequencing during construction and how a roundabout would be built in this location while still maintaining traffic flow. And I know sometimes that can inform pieces of the design and how it's sequenced. So that's just something that's on my mind for the future further along to minimize that impact during construction. Again, I like the idea of some strategies with striping. I really liked the separated bike lane idea if there is adequate right-of-way along those edges, and I speak to this really with leaning towards the single roundabout. It seems to me the single roundabout has the opportunity to maybe enhance some of those edge improvements to really prioritize or give equal favor to bike and ped movement like we do to vehicular movements. So those are my thoughts. I'm in support of a single roundabout, and understanding that the property take is a sensitive issue, and compensation needs to be fair. And I appreciate Walter coming forward and speaking with us and hopefully council regarding his opinion, his family's opinion about their home. Commissioner Kuhn.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I too support the single roundabout. Thank you to Jeff and them. We'd been talking about this for a while. And I understand it's a little more expensive, and it's a time that all government entities right now are strapped for budget money. But that double roundabout, I just think it'll be too much confusion with it, with the closeness of schools. And one thing we're doing here is trying to eliminate in the movement and go in it. My belief that what'll happen is the double roundabout will actually add to it. We can do more with the bicyclists and other things with the single roundabout. And I think the design and the look, and that's one of the largest corners in the city of Flagstaff with people passing it. My mother-in-law used to remind me every morning that my grass at Mims needed to be mowed or something else. It's amazing how many emails we get. And what would you once tell me? There's 22,000 cars a day go by there. And so it needs to be something that Flagstaff can be proud of. But that's my comments.
Thank you. And I see, Walter, you have your hand up again. Did you have a follow-up comment, or is your hand just up?
I didn't have a comment.
Okay.
Need to take my hand down.
Thank you. Vice Chair Parks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also favor the single roundabout for encouraging the bicyclist and pedestrian traffic and covering their needs a little bit more. Keep in mind that the city is in a climate action plan, and we are trying to encourage those modes of transportation. I think it'll be easier on buses and bigger trucks as well. With respect to the other reasons I see this promoting these, especially bike and ped, is but something to be concerned about is not the speed so much within the traffic circle, and have quite a bit of experience with this from living in the Netherlands, but but the speed approaching a traffic circle, which is really where the threats are to pedestrian and bike crossings. And so we would need to consider that as well. And that is also why I don't favor the double roundabout, because of those considerations. I am sorry to see that a home needs to be taken to get to the single roundabout, but I still favor it.
Thank you. Commissioner Morley.
Thank you. At the concept level, I also support the single roundabout and appreciate the willingness of the neighbor to work with the city to advance the design. I'd love to see us work to get to 5 on bike ped. We've got scores of 3s and 4s, and I think it's important that as we advance the concept, that is a goal to make strong advantages for those user groups. You know, I think maybe we've rated some of them a little high right now on, especially for bikes. I think about some of those concepts. I bike this intersection on my daily commute, and I'm honestly sitting here going, I don't know what I would do to get through this. Would I be brave and stay in lane? Would I get up on those sidewalks? They've got sharp corners, aren't that easy to navigate. So I really challenge us to refine those things in the concept and consider the removal of things like the slip lane, which already is a challenge for bikers out there. You know, people approach that at high speeds and don't realize you want to go straight. So I really appreciate everything people have worked at and the creativity to come this far. And just thank you again for bringing it to the commission.
Thank you. Commissioner Kraft, do you have comments you'd like to share or give us your thoughts? Just a moment. I'm checking to see if Nick is. I saw that a couple of times he had to re-engage. So I'm wondering if he's having connection issues.
He's back now. He's coming back.
Okay. Welcome back, Commissioner Kraft.
Hi, sorry, having technical difficulties. I'm curious about the scoring. You say 75, 70, and 65. What is that related to? Is that 100%, or is it some other scoring?
We just accumulated all the points. I actually don't know. Jeremy, do you know how many rows we have? What the maximum point total could be?
I do not. Nope.
Sorry. I don't either. It's just the summation of all the scores.
Well, I guess I'm struck by if it's only 5 points higher than what's there now, is it worth doing at all? Just as playing a devil's advocate. And do you have a master scoring matrix to say, you know, what do we do this over some other project we would do, you know?
Sure. Would you like me to address those a little bit?
Yeah.
Sure. So we applied for this Highway Safety Improvement Program grant because we had a safety issue here. We did a quick screening of the city, looking for locations that had serious injury crashes and fatalities. This one actually had a fatality in the existing signal configuration. So that Roundabouts, as I went over early on, had this really huge reduction in fatalities and serious injury and other injury crashes and PED crashes. Everything safety-wise goes down. So that's how we scored the project, and then it was thrown in a hopper statewide and a competitive process, and we were awarded the funding for this.
Okay, thanks for reminding me of that.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And then the funding was for a roundabout at this location. So if we decided that it wasn't a good project or for whatever reason, and backed out of the grant, then we would just relinquish the funds. It's not a good process, but we would relinquish the funds. We wouldn't be able to move them somewhere else, and they would go back into the hopper for another round of grants. So that's kind of why we're here. We really had trouble. And then the other thing I'd say is we had trouble scoring the existing signal. You know, a lot of times we just said, let's give it 3, kind of a neutral score, but 3 might have been high. So the comparison, as Jeremy said, I won't spend a lot of time on the signal because we weren't super comfortable with how we scored it. Anyways, if you have thoughts on individual rows that you think are a little off, be happy to bump some up and bump some down. That's what we did with the ped and bike advisory committees. We moved some scores around a bit with their feedback, and then, you know, that overall score that we were looking for at the bottom. So I hope I answered your question.
Yes, you did. And I think it sounds like it's not just the final score that is comparable, but down in the detail, you're seeing greater safety in different places. So that makes more sense to me. Thank you.
And Commissioner Kraft, in looking at the single roundabout versus a double roundabout, do you have an opinion you'd like to offer related to those at this time?
Yeah, I do think the single makes more sense due to you know, simplicity, and I think it would be easy, you know, easier for people to adopt.
Thank you. Jeremy, I see your hand is up.
Yes, I apologize. We met actually earlier today with NAPTA operations and so on to take a look at these concepts, and I neglected to mention any of the feedback that we received, which honestly mirrors what we've just heard here tonight. Certainly challenged to do better when it comes to bikes and pedestrians, and favoring the single roundabout over the double, although they were pretty confident on the operational standpoint that either would work for them, but their preference was one, challenged us to do better on bikes and peds.
And I think that's a very nice wrap up to this agenda item that I have heard from everyone on the commission that the preference is the single roundabout, but to begin to look a little bit more closely as the design develops and the bike and pedestrian facilities, and see if there are ways to improve it, to bump up those numbers, those scores, to have a strong advantage in those categories for that single roundabout. So with that, unless there is further discussion, that is our recommendation. Is there anything else that you would like to hear from us, Jeremy and Jeff, before we move forward to the next agenda item?
Do you want to venture a number for your row for the commission? The pedestrian and bike advisory committees went with 4-3-2. Where would you like to be beyond just saying the single was favorable?
I would say 5 for a single and 3 for double.
I could go with that, or 4 for single, 3 or 2 even for the double. I think it's confusing. And then I guess the existing signal's neutral over in the categories.
I guess
How do you put that together, Julie?
I'm inclined to do a 4 for the single, only because of the full take on that resident. Otherwise, it would be a 5. I think, my opinion. 4-3-2. Yep, and that's what Vice Chair Parks has offered. Works for Kate. Bob, are
I'm
you
good with it. I'm good with 4-3-2.
okay? Nick, are you good with 4-3-2?
I don't fully understand what that means, but yes.
Oh. So 4 would be some advantage, 3 is neutral, 2 is some disadvantage. So we'd be giving the single roundabout, saying it's more advantageous, the single over the double and the existing signal.
Yes, that makes sense.
Okay, excellent. Anything else, Jeff and Jeremy?
I'm good now.
I think we have one last comment, but I'd like to thank you all for your feedback.
Councilmember McCarthy.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that I think that there will be quite a few council members that will be very interested in doing whatever we can to help bicycle and pedestrian flow through the intersection. I think you already know that, but I'm just kind of reaffirming that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Okay, I would like to move to the next agenda item, D, Country Club Drive. This is a citizen request, and these are from the citizens residing along Country Club Drive from Bear Paw to Continental, concerns about speeding and general safety of vehicles along that section of roadway. It's my understanding that we do not have a presentation regarding this matter, but it was important to place this on the agenda because we have had quite a few contacts related to issues and concerns in this area. And I would like to, if possible, just to give my commissioners a little bit of context here, if I could share my screen. I have Google Earth open just to have that in front of us of the area specifically that we're talking about. Is that okay, Jeff?
Yeah, take it away.
All right. Commissioners, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Right.
Yep.
So here we have Country Club Drive. This is the driving range, the putt-putt course, Old Walnut Canyon Road. The traffic interchange is a little bit up to the north. So as you may know, this is kind of the pinch point at I call it the pinch point, but the narrowing. And then it goes into a more residential area, Country Club Drive. And the area of concern is specifically from Continental, which is this intersection right down here, from Bear Paw to Continental. So that's Continental, and then this is Bear Paw. My understanding is that this is signed, I know through here it's signed 25 miles per hour. Is that consistent that whole stretch, Jeff?
No.
Yeah, we transitioned from Country Club Drive north of Old Walnut Canyon at 40 miles per hour, and then it transitions, I believe, to 30 from Old Walnut Canyon to Bear Paw, and then 25.
Okay, so 40 up in this section, 30 this little piece right here, and then 25 as it goes through here. Did I get that correct?
You did, thank you.
And then what is the roadway classification of Country Club?
It's a major collector.
Okay, thank you. So I understand, Jeff, that the city's intent is to do some data collection related to speed and counts. And that's the intent is to do that when the weather allows. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I was able to pull a couple things together, but yes, so we received a petition, I think it was in middle to late October. We did set hoses in, I think, early November, or maybe it was late October still. We jumped on it pretty quickly, and we had issues with the equipment. We don't have good data. So we did set hoses once, and the data is no good. Basically, in order to capture speeds and volumes, you need two hoses to work, so that you capture the first axle going across the first hose and the second hose to determine the speed. One of the hoses didn't work, so we only got single pulses or uneven amount. Anyways, the data was bad, so yes, we will redo that when weather allows, which you never know. Could be March, could be April. You never know how our winter will go here, but we need a dry week. We need a week where there's, decent temperatures. Really cold temperatures are a problem. Wet is a problem. Snow and ice obviously is a no-go. So it's a little bit tricky to do this time of year. Very tricky, actually.
Okay. And before I shared my screen for the Google Earth, you had the petition open. Can you please open that again?
Oh yeah, we lost my screen. Here we go. Should I zoom a little?
Please.
Everyone leans in.
I know.
So here's the petition that we received in October.
Okay, so I'm going to read it aloud just for those that may have a smaller screen. It's hard to read. This signed petition is from residents of Country Club Drive between Bear Paw and Continental, a residential area with steep hills and major curves. We respectfully request action from the city to protect this neighborhood, 1, from speeders and 2, from large trucks traveling to and from I-40. Some suggested remedies for these problems include: A, remove all I-40 directional signs from and around this residential neighborhood. B, increase number of speed limit and local traffic only signs. C, posting of digital flashing signs providing drivers with current speeds. D, increased officer presence for enforcement. And E, consider additional drainage ditches to slow vehicles rather than speed bumps. And then there is item F in here, handwritten: crosswalks on Oakmont where golfers and walkers walk. That curvy road is bad. I believe I read that correctly. Okay. So what I'd like to do, we have some members of the public here in that community to speak with us. But first, before we go into that, commissioners, do you have any questions for staff at this point before we ask members of the public to provide some comments? I have a question for Lieutenant Higgins. I see you wrote a note in the chat, Lieutenant, that increased officer present for enforcement is underway. Can you speak to that a little bit? Jeff, have you talked to Lieutenant Higgins about this one? I don't hear him.
We've exchanged emails.
Yeah, I got a mute issue.
There we go.
Thank you. Welcome.
Yeah, I reached out to my traffic enforcement supervisor. He runs the motor squad, and he's had the motorcycle officers working that area. They've been working it quite a bit, but they still haven't seen much of an impact on the speed issue yet. So they're going to continue to try and get in there and work it.
Thank you.
And I can run through the rest of the list if you're interested.
Yes, please.
Before we get going. Sure. So remove directional signs. So this was historically an issue. We think it was semis leaving Little America, thinking that they couldn't turn left to get to the interstate, so they'd turn right. They'd head down Butler and eventually they'd be lost in the neighborhood. So we had directional signs at 4th Street and then a second set down at Mount Pleasant, directing people out of the neighborhood because literally we had semis at the end of Butler trying to make a U-turn on the arterial. It wasn't a daily occurrence, but it was happening. I think with GPS, that's really not much of an issue anymore. And so we've removed all those signs. We actually were in process, if they weren't already gone when we received this petition, a handful of signs. We also removed some of the double yellow striping through the neighborhood on a couple of these streets that we had been using the double yellow striping in concert with the directional signs, not to direct people through the neighborhood, but to capture the lost people that were out on Butler way east of where they should be. So we've already worked on that one. And the rest of them we'll just talk about as it comes up. We did pull crashes as well. So I have a couple of crash maps I could flash up if you'd like to see those before people get started, but we can wait. We can do it either way.
I would like to see those, Jeff. Thank you.
Okay. So let's see here. This is all of the data we have. This is 18 years of crashes for the city of Flagstaff. So you can see, to orient you, this is Route 66. You can see my cursor, and then here's the interstate. And as you mentioned, the Country Club interchange. So this is Country Club Drive coming down, and here's Oakmont. And then Bear Paw would be right here. So this is the section of road that we're talking about. And here's Continental and Butler. So you get a feel for kind of the density over 18 years for, this is residential, this is residential. You can kind of see how things typically lay out. So that's 18 years. It's just a lot of dots. We can look at 10 years. Slightly different pattern. We haven't had enough time to look at these in any detail, but just to give you a feel for what's going on out there. And this is how many crashes we've had in 5 years across the city. So obviously 18 looks a lot different than 5. Over 5 we've had, it's hard to count them. Looks like maybe up to a dozen in 5 years across Continental and Country Club. So just to give you an idea of what's going on out there. And that's about the data collection I was able to pull together in the last couple days.
Thank you for that. At this time, I'd like to call for public comment. I appreciate your patience on the previous agenda items. If you would please either notify me so I can call on you by either a comment or raising your hand.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm going to start with Richard again. Thank you. Go ahead, Richard.
Thank you. I appreciate everybody and appreciate your time. Some of what I'm going to say is going to be a little bit repetitive, but I'll be brief. I live on 3300 North Country Club Drive, and I'm here to request some additional immediate action to put in place what is necessary to reduce the excessive speeding on Country Club Drive. And as we spoke about it, specifically between Bear Paw and Continental traveling east and west. This issue of speeding, as Jeff has pointed out, has been reported and has been going on for a number of years. And this section of roadway, residential road, with a posted speed limit of 25 consists of steep grades exceeding 10% and blind curves. And this is some of the issues that we're facing. It does serve as a feeder street for other single-family homes in the area, but realistically, it serves as what I call a road course to many. And the road frequently wins against the limited driving skills, as evident by the number of accidents that you saw, continuing reports to the police. And obviously, for those of you who live in the area or near the area, those large boulders or fencing you see in front of our homes on this section of road isn't for decoration. It's actually for protection. Guardrails, that's what it is. It is guardrails. As you drive through that neighborhood, you can see damaged fencing or crushed boulders. It's really not something I believe that Flagstaff wants to present. Last summer, the neighbors on this section of road signed a petition, which you just recently saw, to reinforce the message of the importance for the city to address the specific speeding issues. This petition, as you now know, is delivered to Jeff and to Reed Miller. The mood of the neighbors at this point is one of deep frustration, as ongoing calls to Mr. Bowman's office and the constant calls to the Flagstaff police is, well, slow. And I know it's due to staffing and what might be deemed as more important. Last summer, I did work with Reed Miller, as Jeff mentioned, to remove those signs, the I-40 signs that were routed for non-residential traffic necessarily moving through the neighborhood. And this was deeply appreciated, and it did help the mood of the neighbors. We are hoping this small step will aid in some of the reduction of unwarranted traffic and the large tractor rigs that constantly, still to this day, and as recently as 3 days ago, move through the neighborhood. And these are tractor rigs that are over 60,000 pounds and make the attempt to turn from Country Club onto Edgewood or go up the hill outside the Country Club and out towards Little America. I also worked with Sergeant St. James of the Flagstaff Police Department in last fall, and he allowed me to measure and record using his radar gun. Now, what I'm about to tell you, I don't have in a PowerPoint presentation, but I hope you understand what I'm trying to say here. Over 4 days between October 6th and 10th, less than 3.75 hours, total hours, of collecting data using the official calibrated radar gun, with no vehicle recorded under 31 miles per hour, 44 recorded speeders with the low of 31 and the highest speed of 68 miles per hour. This is in a residential neighborhood. The average speed for those collected was 37 miles per hour in a 25 mile an hour zone. Simply put, just wow. Let that sink in for a minute. And you have to keep in mind, this data was, if you can imagine what Jeff is planning to do with the tows is, You collect this data in a 24-hour period, I'm sure we're going to see it, and I bet you that he's going to see it in more frequent during the spring and summer timeframes. There is clearly a problem here. The ongoing speeding in a neighborhood where men, women, and children, not to mention the abundant wildlife, use the roadway to walk, ride bikes, and enjoy Flagstaff. I have witnessed, along with the Flagstaff police, near misses of individuals about to be hit, other neighbors jumping to safety to avoid being hit, and of course the ever-screeching brakes as cars turn onto Edgewood from Century Club. My house is on the corner of Edgewood and Country Club. I witnessed so much, it's very scary. It's not my intent to sound dramatic, but these are the facts, and we must address the speeding issue. As mentioned, the removal of the I-40 signs is a small step. The neighbors have also offered reasonable suggestions such as increased signage. Jeff had mentioned some of the signage, but if you go east or west, you will notice that there is more signage if you're traveling eastbound on Country Club towards Bear Paw, or if you go the opposite direction, there's less signs. It was just recently that when the road was paved, they actually put some put slow down, speed signs on the road. And fortunately, one of our neighbors caught the third-party construction crew and told them appropriately where to put it. They could have cared less where to put it. In addition, increased officer presence will benefit the message. Sergeant James did authorize portable radar signs, and these are the radar signs that post and look and reflect back your speed as you're traveling down the road. What a difference this made. Having those radar signs, it's very similar to what we see on Butler by the fire station. In a couple of places on this section of road will do wonders to help. We recognize that we can't slow down all of the people that tend to speed in this road, but we have to recognize that this road has variances. It has steep hills, it has blind curves. Having worked with a section of road in Glendale, Arizona, where we did face similar speeding issues, I can say that radar signs, showing digital speed, more speed limit, and radar patrol signs has drastically reduced speeding. This is something comparable that we did, and it could be, if we work together as a community and with the city, we could showcase this as a model. As more and more people are working from home, I believe that we can do this in working together. Otherwise, we're continue to see some of the speeding issues. I appreciate your time and your serious proactive consideration. We must be diligent in addressing the speeding issue in Country Club between Bear Paw and Continental. It's not a matter of if someone will be seriously injured or worse. It's just a matter of when, if nothing is done. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And I have two other requests here to speak. Joanne and Stephen Brown, followed by Tom Henderson. So I'd like to invite Joanne and Stephen Brown.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay. I have trouble with my computer, and I was on a laptop or iPad, and I couldn't get in, so I'm on my husband's.
We can hear you just fine. Go ahead.
Okay. I agree with Rich. We have lived there much longer than Rich has, and thankful he was able to help me contact the police, contact this, that. We've been working with Jeff, and thank you for putting this on the agenda. There have been many accidents, and I didn't see the slide for the accidents, but since we've lived there, I remember seeing at least seven or more accidents happen. And Bill King, who was a builder, lived on this road too. And he gave me, before they moved out, they gave me a folder full of pictures from accidents. And since we've lived there, we've had 3 accidents. One was a drunk driver, ended up at the corner of our garage and ran away, tried to drive away, and they caught him down the street. His car gave way, lost oil and everything, couldn't get up the hill. And there's a lot of other ones, and we'd like to either show proof of the accidents, or if you don't believe us, but we would like to have something done. We are walkers, we are bikers, we are people with strollers across the street. There's young kids. I'm sometimes I get really upset. You don't want to see me then. So please consider doing something like the flashing. We like the flashing signs because that temporary thing did slow people down. And I don't know if you can put in temporary bumps, like rubber bumps that could go across the street. And because we were told that you didn't want bumps because of it damages the snow plows. Well, can you put in temporary ones? That's also an idea. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom Henderson.
Hello, thank you for having me, giving me the opportunity to talk. I think Richard has pretty much laid out the issues we have, but a couple of observations. One is that the worst speeding times that we have are first thing in the morning, people either heading out to work or even more likely commercial trucks coming through. Yard people, everybody else, and they are not from the neighborhood, and they don't care about how fast or slow they're supposed to be driving. So that's one thing. Last spring we had a significant pickup or uptick in traffic down Country Club, but that was because they were doing the 4th Street Bridge, and everybody was cutting through the neighborhood in order to get over to Butler without having to go a very long way around. But that's now resolved itself. The only real thing that concerns me is one of the reasons that probably one of the principal reasons they have that speed limit through this area at 25 is because right at the top of Scioto, which is right down from my house, is the gateway into the wildlife sanctuary, and we've got deer and elk coming through there all the time, and the deer particularly during the day. The elk at least kind of, are usually back at home by 5 o'clock in the morning, but when they're coming down, when the deer are coming down to graze on the golf course, they come down at any time of day. They come right through my yard many times. So it's a concern that we probably have 2 or 3 deer taken out every year, it seems like. So it's whatever they can do. I will recognize the fact that I have noticed an uptick in the police activity. That they've been running speed checks through there, and there's been a lot more in the last 4 or 5 months than I've seen in the 13 years I've lived here. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members from the community that would like to speak? Commissioners, do you have any questions for the members community? Okay. Well, let's talk about next steps related to the comments that we've heard tonight. So next steps for City of Flagstaff would be to place traffic counts and also be able to determine speed, to do additional I heard some of the information. That's great information to have about speed in the area. What city staff can do is place equipment and for a longer duration to gather that over a period of time, and then bring that data back to the commission for discussion, so that Richard, Joanne, and Tom. There have been a couple of other locations in town where there have been speed and safety concerns, and the process that those projects have gone through is data collection, and then what we do along with city staff is to create a matrix identifying kind of a next steps to see what trigger points, what scores highly related to these areas. And then we can focus in on these areas for possible mitigation. And sometimes that's temporary placement of things within the right of way. Thank you very much, Brett. I think that's Brett. Yes, I will read that. I appreciate that. Sometimes we'll place temporary signage out there, or there may be some different striping changes or other measures to test to see if that can help alleviate the situation. So next steps from here are data collection as soon as weather allows, going through the assessment, and then coming back to Transportation Commission to vet that and have further conversation, come up with a plan of what could possibly be implemented. And there's some ideas there. So that's moving forward. We really need to get that data. And then once we have that, I welcome you back to Commission to have that discussion of the specifics. And I would like to add, I did receive an additional comment, and thank you for the reminder. Excuse me while I scroll to that. Okay, this is from Kathy Mitchell. And this is to members of the commission. I am unable to present during discussion of this item. I respectfully request that the city add 2 crosswalks on Oakmont Drive between Continental Country Club and adjacent golf courses on the opposite side of the street. Both of the areas in question are close to blind spots, and as a resident of the area, I have witnessed numerous instances where oncoming traffic was 1, speeding, and 2, unable to properly see that individuals were crossing the street. Crosswalks would be very welcome by residents and people who walk/drive in the area. And she provided her address, and so thank you for consideration, Kathy Mitchell. We'll include that in the notes for commission. Is there any other further discussion from commissioners or follow-up comments from staff related to the comments that I've offered?
I'd like to add, I'm very familiar with that road and I drive on it often. Lieutenant Higgins, is there any way, on certain times, the weather's been a little bad lately, that you can get the temporary speed signs up there and keep them, or move them around a little bit? I know it happens. People get used to them and then blow it off. But if, moving around and adjusting and other things, and I realize you're doing a lot and Sergeant James is doing a lot. We really expect that. But those portable signs, speed signs, really impacted.
Yeah, I know Sergeant James maintains a list. And basically the signs go out for a certain period of time according to their placement on the list, because we work traffic complaint zones all throughout the city. So I'll reach out, make sure it's still on there. But it's one of those things you don't want to leave them out there because people just tune them out after a while. So you want to keep it changed up a little bit, have the sign out there for a while, and then have the motors out there working directed traffic enforcement again, and just keep people on their toes.
Thank you, Lieutenant Higgins.
Commissioner Morley.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thanks to the members of the public for taking the time to come tonight. Generally, I'm supportive of taking measures to decrease traffic speeds, especially in neighborhoods, and particularly looking at design solutions that can be permanent, because I think some of the temporary things that go in and out just don't have that lasting effect. I think big picture, it still brings me to 2 large questions for the commission, where we have many asks of the community. And as Commissioner Kraft was saying earlier, how do we start to set priorities for where we're spending our money on all these projects? I would love to do all of it, right? But how do we bring that into the conversation? And then my second comment, just again, is how do we change our design moving forward so that there's not always these issues coming in front of us? And I know many of these roads are old and maybe the issues would have been addressed, but we just repeatedly see the speeding issues in neighborhoods. I would love to solve it at a much higher systematic level than the individual case-by-case basis. So thanks again to the public, and thanks for staff for working to get them answers.
I do see we have a member of the public that would like to comment again. And Joanne, I'd ask that you be brief. We would like to close out public comment on this item, but please
Okay.
go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask one more question. Since we have a lot of visitors visiting in the summertime and in the fall, if they could tell the public what is how they're gonna deal with Milton, the traffic on Milton. They keep adding more businesses and so forth, and it just keeps growing the traffic. So it would be nice to let the public know, because we get lots of questions. Since we live there, we get lots of questions, but we're only there like 5 months, 6 months out of the year. So, you know, people try and stay away from it, but it's difficult. Thanks.
Right. Any other final discussion? Jeff, do you have any follow-up comments to what you've heard?
No, I want to thank you. You did a great job describing the process that we go through. We will, as I mentioned before, we'll get out there as soon as weather allows. So potentially as early as the next meeting, we'll have some data and some ideas to talk about. I know Milton Road wasn't on agenda, but in case you're going to log off quickly, we are planning to add that to our agenda in April. So I want to catch that before Ms. Brown logged off, just in case she got away quick.
Well, thank you to the members of the public. We hear you. Let's move forward on next steps and start seeing what we can do. Okay, with that, I would like to close out new business and move to old business. We do not have anything listed under old business. So therefore, we're going to go to concluding general business. We've got reports from the BAC and PAC. Links are provided in the agenda for you to refer to if you'd like. Martin, do you have any highlights that you'd like TC to hear this evening, if you are still on the line with us?
I'm still here. Thank you. Just real quickly, we've been working on kind of finalizing our list of priority projects, and they're really two things that kind of created an imperative to do that now. One is that the city's budget cycle that moves forward, and we need to get our capital plans kind of prepared and ready for the next year as well as the next 5 years. So we need to identify our priority projects, and then the second imperative is the grant that Mountain Line received for Federal Transit Administration Section 5307 and 5339 funds, which will bring $5.5 million in federal money to bike and ped projects. So we've been working on identifying potential projects for that. We've also started meeting internally to kind of figure out the next steps in the process to get our draft plan out to the public for public comment and review. So hopefully that will happen sooner rather than later. And I think that's about it, unless there's any questions.
All right. Thank you, Martin. Let's go to item 4B, and sorry, congratulations on that grant. that is outstanding, and I'm so excited about that, as I know everyone here tonight is. So moving on to 4B, informational items, 2 from commissioners and staff. Any items, commissioners, that they would like to share with the group?
This is Kate. I can't find my chat. Sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to let people know that we're about to kick off our 5-year plan at Mountain Line. I anticipate we'll probably do that before the commission meets again. And if the commission wants to be involved in that or wants a presentation early on, be happy to do that at an upcoming agenda item. We continue to work on the Caspar intersection project that's near final design, if not final at this point, and we are working actively to try to get construction procurement done, so that way we can do that this summer. That's the goal. We really don't want to delay another year. That, and then obviously the outcomes of the Milton Corridor Master Plan will be important to what Mountain Line does with a potential BRT project. And so, happy to discuss that in April as we talk about the Corridor Master Plan. And if there's any other questions on any projects we're doing, happy to take those too. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Any other commissioner updates? All right. Jeff, do you have the transportation engineering staffing update?
Just wanted to mention that we're out advertising again for a project manager position. It opened on Friday and it closes the first week of March. So again, if you know anybody, let them know.
Right. Moving to the third item, December. That's funny. That would be April.
No. It meant to be December.
Excuse me. December agenda item updates.
I was just, it was just a quick update. I mean, we're working on, I think we ended up with 5 radar feedback signs. We're working on procurement of those with Public Works. The weather's not really, it's not the time of year to implement anything, but we're progressing on all these projects. So it was meant to be December, just to let you know, we're still plugging along at all of those. There was a lot of things that came out of the December meeting.
Okay. And the next item is a commission update to City Council in June. And so that'll be something that we can prepare for moving forward. And the commission update, I would think, would include items that we'd like to highlight, we've been working on, and we get an opportunity to share these with City Council. So I'm looking forward to that meeting in June and planning on it. And would like to engage commissioners in discussions related to the items that we do want to highlight in a future meeting. Okay. The next item is Transportation Commission recordings. The link is there. What's great about the meeting minutes now is that they're also, the notes simply refer to times in the meeting when we talked about that item. So as you review meeting minutes, you can compare that to the recordings, and it's easy to go back and find things. Anything that you'd like to add on that, Jeff?
No, just that, yeah, we had a while there where we didn't have recordings for the meetings, and we've figured out a way to patch those in. We've also, Stephanie's done a great job creating a YouTube channel. And as of today, there's also a bicycle advisory committee, a pedestrian advisory committee, and the Transportation Commission are all kind of grouped together on YouTube. So you'll be able to check out those meetings going forward for the time being anyways.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Stephanie. Okay. Moving on to item C, the next meeting, regular meeting, April 7th, 2021. I invited Jeff Malbach and Dave Wessel to that meeting to give us an introduction to MetroPlan and talk about their mission and vision, and they've agreed to do that, so I'm welcoming them. We've got the local roadway cross-section benchmarking, and then we've heard a third item might be the ADOT Milton Master Plan update, the Mountain Line update related to the 5-year plan, and then possibly a follow-up with Continental or Country Club if data are available. Those are the 5 on my list. Do commissioners have any others to be considered agenda items for April?
Yeah, I'm getting we have a lot of people that live off of old Route 66. And with the influx of the new construction there, they're concerned about getting out of some of the older residential neighborhoods there. And I know part of it's county, part of it's city, and there's some areas in there. So I'd like to see what the plan is moving forward on that for the city, with the city.
Can I ask a clarification for which part? Old 66?
I'm sorry, my fault. Going over there where the new development is there off of Woody Mountain Road in that area, that's where we're getting a lot of questions. And from the residential neighborhoods on the other side of Old 66 there.
Okay. I'll see what I can pull together. That's all ADOT jurisdiction, but I will see what I can pull together for us.
Yeah. Okay.
So Timber Sky area
Yeah, exactly. The Timber Sky area.
and Presidio. Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Any other items from commissioners or staff? All right. Well, I thank you all for your time, and thanks for your patience and me having a little bit of a bumpy start, and for Bob keeping me in line. But I look forward to seeing you all in April, and with that, I move to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Yes, second.
Thank you, Kate. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All right. You all have a wonderful evening. Stay safe. Thank you, Jeff, Jeremy, Stephanie, Brett, Rick, the whole team, Lieutenant Higgins. Thank you, commissioners. Good night.
Thanks, Julie, for doing a good job.
Thank you. Bye.
Good night.